Welcome to the Pineapple Perspective with Troy Hooper. This is sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. I have the remarkable opportunity today to speak to another incredible industry leader, somebody that I've worked with in the past, although be it a few years now. We've stayed in close contact and always trying to keep up with what Sebastian's working on. Today, I welcome Sebastian Stahl to the show. Hi, Sebastian.
Hey, Troy, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you, sir. Sebastian's the founder of Breath. Breath's a strategic restaurant marketing agency. We're going to get more into that in just a little bit, but I think we've got some great thoughts and topics to share with the audience and hopefully bring some value to restaurant owners, operators, and brands out there today. Sebastian, we start off every show by asking our guest, what does hospitality mean to you?
So it's a great question, Troy. I mean, I think we kind of all have similar, meanings to what, that we have for that word. But for me, it's about human connection. I think I think we're all in this industry because we're people, we're just people, and we just like people. We want to be connected to other people, and we seek that. And people come to, to restaurants and to find connection. So that's what it's all about for me.
Sebastian, as you're growing up in life and you're starting your career, how do you come to understand that? How do you define, how did you come to that definition of what hospitality meant to you? And I guess that might lead into why did you get into hospitality to begin with?
So listen, I think as just my nature itself is I like to be with people. I like to connect with people, and I'm an empath by nature. And I just think that I was just kind of drawn into that because I would see it, right. And then I had my one of my uncles. He was in head of the oldest restaurants in the city back in Latin America, and every time I would go to his restaurant, I would see that connection that he had with people. He was Italian. He had he was very charismatic, and the way he would connect with people, I just found it special, so I was attracted to that industry since, early on. And I didn't know I was going to get into it, but that's really what happened. And later in my college years, that's when I really started really being attracted more by the industry. And it would be the same thing. I would just go to a restaurant and experience that connection and that that those interactions that happen there, and just like how it makes you feel when you're there.
That's the secret sauce, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make people feel? Not what
Mm-hmm.
the food is, not what the
Mm-hmm.
price is, right? We always talk about at the end of the day, you're selling an experience, you're selling time, you're selling connection, right? And at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, that's what we're really looking for when we go sit down in a restaurant, right? So, Sebastian, let's get a little into your history so the audience has some context. You today are the founder and owner and leader of Breath, a restaurant marketing agency, but you started your career in at least at one point owning restaurants, and that had a little bit to do with how you went from your home country Guatemala to Miami. Tell us a little bit about that story.
100%. So, listen, like I was saying, started in college, the interest for restaurants. We were actually, my family's all business people, and we were just looking into starting a business, and with one of my brothers, and we first started looking at franchising. And at that time, that was back in, oh man, I can't even remember. It was a long time ago, like 2001, something like that. We were looking to look at different options for franchises. So we'd like to actually, at Subway at that time, to bring it into Guatemala City. We looked at Quiznos, and we actually went to meet the guys in Costa Rica that had the master franchise for them. So we started looking at that side of the business, and we had other friends that were doing it. They were like big, master franchise for Burger King in the city. So we seek, to them for advice. So basically, the advice was like, don't get into it right now. So we stayed away from that. We didn't get
Ask a
into that franchise.
restaurateur if you should get into a restaurant, or ask a franchisee if you should become a franchisee.
Exactly. So,
Not
but
always the best people to start with, probably.
of course not. But we're stubborn as hell, and that's why we get into it. You know what I mean? So that happened. We didn't really do that, pursue that. But then a couple of years later, we developed this concept with my two brothers, older brothers, and I mean, these guys that kind of stayed in a different side of business, in real estate and different things, in coffee, and I'm the one that stayed in the restaurant project. So started with it was a mix of it was sort of like a fast casual concept. The first restaurant that I opened in Guatemala City, that went well, man. It was crazy, of course, because I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. So I was there from I decided to open breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
It's the
The
worst
more
freaking
I'm
idea
open,
you
the
can.
more I can sell, right? Yeah. I'm going to work from
Exactly.
5 to 6 in the morning to 11 o'clock at
Yep.
night. No problem.
Yep. Yep. That was it. That was it. And and just like I had no idea what I was doing. Again, the kitchen setup was completely different. The ingredients, like just the whole line, everything was different. It was nuts, man. But whatever. That's how you learn, right? So I got into that. Then I decided to close breakfast because I wasn't doing well. And but then lunch and dinner actually, took off. So, anyways, that restaurant, sold it in a few years later. They actually moved to Miami, and that's where it continued. I actually swore, Troy, that I wasn't going to continue in the industry because it was so hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That experience of opening a restaurant like that and open to close 7 days a week, it was just nuts. And but there's something about this industry, and I think you will know, and everybody in the industry knows that once you're in it, it's just like you can't get out. You know what I mean? It's like the Godfather thing. You know what I mean? It's like,
I've tried. It failed.
yeah. Exactly. So it's like once you know it, you can't go back. And so I started, dreaming again with a different concept of doing something different in Miami. Again, I was still young, and I didn't really know exactly what the hell I was doing at that time. So we got into it. I had a friend in the city, and we opened another restaurant. This was more on the casual dining side, a little bit more on the upscale casual dining. And so we decided to open this, cool concept, super creative in Wynwood. Back in the day, Wynwood was still a rough area, for the people that know Miami. But it was up and coming. So we could see, that was definitely an area that was going to blow up, but it would take some time. So that's how we transitioned into that side of the business. That restaurant did well for a little bit of time. Again, the location was, again, it's still so important. Location,
Yeah.
because it doesn't. We had a great space, everything upcoming area, but it was up and coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean,
traffic's not
Wynwood
this.
today is still only about 2 blocks by 2 blocks of the top performing street that people walk on.
Yeah. So, but we didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. So a learning experience. That concept was a little bit too. It wasn't the right concept at the right time, I would say. And so what happened was that we closed that restaurant, partnered with these other guys, a couple of guys from Mexico, and Brazilian, Mexican guys, great people. And so we opened another concept in that space because we had a great lease. So from there, that concept took off, and it did really, really well in that area. It was just an underserved market for that specific concept and that type of food, which was more approachable and super focused on processes and a lot of things that that I learned, and we learned with these guys. And then we just started growing, man. So that company grew into 3, 4, 5 locations. Then the company acquired another big restaurant group in the city, and so we just started growing. Then we got into the arenas and all of that stuff. So I was able to, at some point, I stepped out of operations and doing all that stuff, and I stepped into the marketing role, which was originally my background, and what I'd really like to do in the industry.
So you started focusing on restaurant marketing for your own restaurant group,
Mm-hmm.
and you obviously use that as your laboratory to test ideas
Yes.
and see how the market responded and things like that. How did you decide to make a transition from working in that restaurant group that you helped found to creating an agency to provide these services to other restaurants?
Sure. So it was from my own personal experience and the frustrations that I faced as an owner. You know what I mean? And especially when when you don't have enough resources to hire a full team in house, which it depends on where you're at. You can't do. You start working with agencies, and even if you're big, you still work with agencies, right? So I try to find agencies that could help us, right, and to do marketing properly and to do things right. And I just couldn't find them because not all marketing is not created equal. Restaurants is a very particular industry, and it requires knowledge of operations and just how a restaurant works and the whole dynamic to be able to do marketing right. So when we work with different agencies, we had faced a lot of those issues that of course we could run ads and do different things, but it just didn't work so well. And also, restaurants have come a long way now, but technology at that time for restaurants was very limited. So I was always obsessed on trying to find ways to measure success, right? Because this is not e-commerce. This is, I'm not selling t-shirts or whatever it is. And, it's a conversion, and that's so clear. The path with restaurants is not always a straight path. You know what I mean? So It's like, how do we figure this out? So, so through that process that we went through with our restaurants, and the frustrations that we face with working with different agencies, that's how, we noticed that there was a need for an agency that was dedicated to restaurants, but that new restaurants that came from the restaurant world. So I definitely, found that to be true for us and for me when I was also an independent owner. And so I started doing that to help other people in the industry.
So, talk a little bit about your focus of the agency, just so we have a little foundation as we start to talk about some of these topics that really matter to the restaurant industry. Full disclosure, when you and I worked together on a project a couple of years ago, it was a full brand package, right? Ultimately, a restaurant, legacy restaurant brand wanted to create an offshoot or a sister brand in the sort of quick serve, even starting off in the virtual space first out of their existing kitchens. And you helped us, I think we had a name maybe, but you helped us create an entire branding ideation, ultimately landing on what I think's a really cool, sexy, fun, vibrant brand for them, which I hope they can do well with in the future. But yeah, talk a little bit about how you focus, because that was, I don't want to pigeonhole you and say, hey, you're a brand house, because I know you do other things, especially in the digital space, with establishing the right websites and other digital assets and things. So, talk a little bit about the agency and what you focus on.
Sure. So, well, we really started the root trigger. I think that's the most important part, which is strategy, right? We need to understand first, like, where your business is at, because again, not all restaurants are equal, and just we got to look at your revenue centers. Basically, we got to see where you're at, what your needs are, and what's going on in your business. So we evaluate your numbers. We go into your numbers and see where you're at, and then from there we create a strategy for you, right? So that's where everything stems from. So a strategy, marketing plan, and we lay out a plan for an entire year, right? Because this is not a short-term game, for marketing, and that entails branding as well. Because many times that we face this, a lot of times, restaurants, they might have been, they might be in business for a long time, so they need to revamp their brand, or sometimes they're coming in with a new concept and they need to create something new. So we start there, right? Strategy, what you need, what the brand is about, who you are. With this project that we're talking about, they had this, long-term brand, but they were branching out into a new, younger demographic. So how can we tie in the legacy into something young and new, right? So how do we create that? So we go into that process as well, and then we go into the execution, meaning the day-to-day execution of what we have on the plan. So that means taking all your channels from your website to all your paid ads, email, SMS, right? And make sure that everything that we have on the plan is executed properly and everything's cohesive, so we see progress, right? And the most important part is also measuring results, right? And then understanding what's happening. We test a lot of different things, and then from there we focus on growth, right? How can we maximize each revenue center in your restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, on the brand side, like you said, establishing an identity so that when you do deploy that digital presence, whether it's organic, social, or paid advertising in all media, is incredibly important. I think restaurants particularly need help the most in that area, right?
Yeah.
Very few restaurant owners started in marketing. So,
Yeah. Yep.
or had any idea about brand identity and voice and
Yeah. Yeah.
cohesive presentation. And one thing that was remarkable in the project you did was not only did you work on this new offshoot brand, but you also presented ideation for the legacy brand to update itself after 40 something years. And the fact that you did not only website, menu, packaging, social identity. I remember seeing email, like a letterhead, email, signatures, business cards, everything had to have that same stamp of cohesive brand consistency, which really makes any company, any business look much more professional, much bigger than it actually is, right? It doesn't matter that you were 2 or 3 stores and you've been around 40 years. Boy, you can really elevate the image of a brand, right? And I think
100%.
not just elevate, right? I think one of the things that you talk about, and something people can get out of reading your book, the Restaurant Marketing Insider, is not just elevate, but actually connect with the audience that you want to connect with. I think
Hmm.
a lot of brands are misaligned with the customer they're trying to attract. Talk a little
Right.
bit about that, just because it's pretty and just because it's cohesive and just because it's consistent doesn't necessarily mean it's portraying the image to the
Sure.
consumer that would most best resonate with that brand, right?
Right, right, right. So, we go through an extensive research part at the beginning when we're developing any brand to really understand the restaurant's audience and who they're trying to reach. Right. We got to look at your menu. We got to look at your ambience. We got to look at your setting. Like everything needs to tie in and needs to be cohesive. Right. And so that's really our process. Once we understand who your audience is, then we can start working on the creative on what that's going to look like. Right. Your brand voice, and then establishing the design elements that are going to really reflect what you're all about, right? And the most important part here, Troy, I think, is branding and developing a brand is not just about looking pretty and having a nice site and all these things and having that presence, which is good and everything all cohesive, but it's about building a brand for the future, right? So if you're investing in a restaurant or as a restaurant, or if you're established and you're already there, you're looking at the future. You want to build brand value, because if at some point you want to sell, that's going to increase the value of your brand considerably, right?
Yeah.
Having an operations is good, but having a brand is way better, as you know. So
Yes.
that's why, we think it's crucial to invest in this part of the business, right? In that part of marketing. And a lot of restaurants are hesitant to do that. Especially, of course, I understand when you're starting out, they just, throw a logo in there, open a, and something's kind of creative and looks okay. But with time, and if you're really thinking of the future, you want to focus on building a brand.
Yeah, I mean, having worked in the emerging space most of my career, it's remarkable to see the results, and the exponential value that a well designed, well thought out, well created
Mm,
entire identity makes a difference, because a consumer looks at it and says, wow, this feels different, right?
right,
Yes, the mom and pop down the street, I love that dish. I love the owner. They're fantastic. But when I'm out and about and I'm thinking of taking people somewhere, et cetera, it's that feeling that it almost is
right.
intangible, that
Mm,
this is buttoned up, this is tied up. When I walk in, the
hmm.
colors and the icons and the furniture, it all feels like it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? And there's
Yep.
there's almost a calmness or a sense of security that
Right.
feeling gives you,
Mm,
versus sort of a disjointed, haphazard kind of environment. I'm talking about the physical environment, but certainly it can be the digital environment, could be Instagram, could be website, could be a whole lot of things.
right.
But I think it's really important. And talk a little bit about this, Sebastian. I think something also all business owners, but particularly in the restaurant industry, people don't really think about is the need to revisit the
Hmm.
the identity, revisit the brand. Has the audience changed? Has, let's say you're in 5 stores in a major market like Miami, but Miami has evolved over the last 3 to 5 years, right? A lot of New
100%.
Yorkers, New Yorkers never went south of Hollywood, really never south of Fort Lauderdale. And now New York has invaded downtown Miami and Brickell. So,
Yep.
the identity of the consumer actually changes cyclically, like probably every 5 to 10 years. So if you're in
Yes.
business 5, 10, 15, 20 years, your customer might be changing. And if you're not realizing that, you may
Mm,
no longer identify. And I see that. I get those calls. Troy, I've been in business 20 years and I used to do this number. And now it's
hmm.
just been slowly going down
Hmm.
every year. What's going
Yeah.
on? And so talk a little bit about the need to revisit the brand image identity, or even
Yeah.
even the menu of the concept completely.
Yeah. 100%. Right. We get those calls all the time too. With restaurants that have been established for a while, and it's happened a lot in Miami too. They've been established. We're actually working with a concept there that's been established for 10 years. One of our own concepts in Miami was, it's been established for 15 years.
Yeah.
But we've had to continuously work on innovation, not just on the menu. Of course, we need to menu experience, technology, and brand. Like
Right.
everything ties in together. You basically are reintroducing your brand, your concept to all the new people in the city, because Miami's completely changed.
Yeah.
One of our partners, he was telling me this story the other day. They just, these guys just opened a hand roll spot in downtown in Miami, and he was telling me they were collecting data at the restaurant, and he would look at all the phone numbers there. and everybody was a New York area code, man. So it's like 70%, of the people
Yeah.
that were New York area codes. So that just goes to tell you, okay, so what do I need to do, to not just to stay relevant within the market that already knows you, but then also with the new people that are in the city, how am I going to reintroduce myself to them if they don't know me? Because now competition is fierce, especially in cities like Miami, New York, like all of these cities. So there's restaurants opening left and right. So even if you're established for 15 years, you got 10 restaurants now that are your competition that weren't there before, and you're still with the same brand, with same style, the same menu. Nobody's going to care. You're irrelevant. So you got to stay constantly innovating. And then also, of course, that reflects that entails looking at your branding and how do you refresh that, right? So we've done a few projects like that before in which that's happened. We're doing one in Boston now. They've also been around for like 15 years. So, we were just helping them how to, innovate, how to reestablish that brand in the local market. And that goes through, of course, starts in branding design. And then how do you execute that through all your channels and also your messaging, right? And you have to find what makes you unique and different, right? Who you are. And then how do you communicate that again and again and again? It's about repetition as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to amplify that, you got to be cautious not to try to meet the market. You attract your customer. You
Mm.
create the community that you want to create. You find
Mm-hmm.
the people that want what you're offering: experience, service, environment, food itself, etc. But I think too many folks get distracted by chasing the trend. We do that on
Mm.
menu, we see,
Mm-hmm.
tracing the trend on technology or on the
Oh yeah.
environment of the space or whatever service model. But I think you have to be very thoughtful that you're paying attention to what the consumer is telling you and what consumer is coming to you. And if you're making innovation, you're making edits to this, you're doing it authentically and not using buzzwords, keywords, words of the day, phrases or tips or
Mm.
tactics of the day, because that actually confuses the customer, right? Like if every
Yeah.
time they come in, you've got something new, right? I love the examples of, the Mexican restaurant selling a burger, or whatever, right? The
Yeah.
Mediterranean restaurant has to do pizza now because pizza is the first or second most bought food. And so they're going to do a
Yeah.
Mediterranean pizza now. Well,
Yeah.
did you think that through? Do your customers really want that? Have you asked them? I think that's
Right.
important. So, Sebastian, I've asked all the questions so far. What's on your mind when you think about the modern scenario of a restaurateur and their needs around marketing and the environment that's changing, the technology that's changing, the tools and resources that are available, where attention has gone in the ethos of the consumer? What's on your mind? Tell us from your expert position as you're seeing and working with all these restaurants. What should we be thinking about? What should we be paying attention to?
So, listen, don't chase every shiny object that you see, because that goes, from marketing to operations, right? Like the tech stack, you got to be careful with what you follow, right? It's still a lot of the same things, right? And I think it still starts at the root. It starts at strategy. That's where you need to start, because you can go chase all of these things that come out, like new technologies, new platforms that that will probably you're hoping that they bring you results, and automations and all these cool things that are out there. But if it's not driven by strategy, it's not going to do anything. Nothing sustainable, I would say, because tactics are out there and things that you can do again with the technology out there with all these different platforms, but and they can bring you traffic or they can bring you some sales in the short term. But again, it's about focusing on the long term game, on not just building your brand, but establishing the structure in your restaurant, your marketing structure that will help you really build over time. The rest, again, are just channels. And you learn how to use them, you learn how to utilize them to whatever and adapt them to whatever your strategy is. But that's where you need to start. And yes, you have to have your social presence, your local presence, your website, all of that stuff. And again, those are channels. But again, everything needs to be driven by strategy and where you're heading into the future and how do you build that structure so you can execute over time and not just focus on short-term tactics and revenue driving through these different ways.
Share with us a thought or two some practical, tactical tip, trick, hack uh,
Okay.
that we should be thinking about or taking notice, like maybe a best practice or a case study example
Sure.
that somebody could go to and say, ah, that's what Sebastian was talking about. That makes sense. I see that. Because a
Sure.
lot of us, I'm very visual, right? So I understand what you're saying. It makes sense. I understand the need to have somebody like you come in and support and provide your insights. But as I start to try to digest and understand this as an owner operator, or even a large
Mm.
multi-unit franchisee or large multi-unit owner, yeah, give us some practical tactical tips that might
Sure.
be able to find out there.
So, okay. So first, so when we're talking about strategy, it's understanding your like you have to understand your concept, who you are, right? So, for example, let's say we're talking about a full service restaurant. Yeah. And as we know, these days there's a lot of changes, rising costs, labor costs, they're all high, right? So your margins are thinner. Yep. So you got to see, okay, what makes sense for me to push now? Is it developing a new menu? Probably, maybe not. Right? You got to see what that is. But what about looking at things, and this is happening? There's a lot more focus on driving private events, for example. Yeah, because that's one revenue center in a full service restaurant that can, and is usually not maximized, that where the cost can be controlled completely. And it's very different than just regular dining service or takeout and all that stuff, which incurs with other costs. So something that you want to focus on, for example, if you have a restaurant like this, okay, how can I drive more leads? How can I bring more business for private events? So that's something specific that we do. We generated this whole service focus 100% on lead generation for private events because we found that for those type of restaurants, it's not only high value, it's something that's completely measurable, right? And the cost you can completely control your costs. So that's just one simple thing that we do. And if you were like if you have that type of concept, that's something that you would focus on, right? Now, if you have a fast casual restaurant, that's a whole different deal because you don't have the footprint, you don't have that. Then you have other things that you need to focus on, right? So you have to. It just depends on your concept. So in this case, it might be catering because that's another revenue center that you can control in a different way, and you can grow that side of the business. And there's a huge upside on that. Yeah. So that's just an example of how we would go about strategy, understanding your concept again and what you're about, your food, your menu, all of that stuff, and then developing these tactics that will help you drive traffic or sales or for your restaurant.
Yeah, I think you're hitting it spot on. And I'll say to add to that, because what you said doesn't need any clarification, but I'll even add to that as you were talking. I thought about the example when you look at the quarterly results that are getting posted now every quarter about Texas Roadhouse. And now
Yeah.
Texas Roadhouse may not be in your market, but
Hmm.
just keep in mind a Texas Roadhouse, a Longhorn, all these kinds of concepts. But Texas Roadhouse in particular has dramatically increased its off-premise sales. It's to-go business. It's delivery
Hmm.
pickup business. Now, stop and think about it. This is an American honky-tonk style steakhouse, right?
Yeah.
The steaks are
Yeah.
in a butcher case up front. It's potatoes and bread and steaks. That's what they have.
Hmm. Hmm.
And their sales in off-premise has gone through the roof continuously year over year since the beginning of COVID. And you think to yourself, who the heck is ordering a $35 steak to go in a styrofoam container, right? But
Yeah.
there's something about it, and they
Hmm.
have likely figured out packaging
Hmm.
and the ability to time it in a way to get the food there in the best condition.
Hmm.
Brand matters a lot. Brand.
Yeah.
I understand the brand. I resonate with the brand. Maybe I can't make it, to have that hour and 15-minute experience and sit down and pay a tip and do all those things, but I still crave those buttery yeast rolls, right? And so I'm going to
Right.
get that. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm ordering a burger instead of a steak, but I'm still going to this brand. And I just think to the same point of whether it's private parties, catering is huge. A lot of focus on
Yeah.
catering industry right now. Or even
Hmm.
thinking about how you do off premise. I'll tell you this at Pepper Lunch, two things. We have
Yeah.
spent a year working on one piece of packaging, which
Hmm.
we're about to reveal very soon. And this piece of packaging had multiple iterations because we have a very unique food product. How
Right.
do we get our very unique food product, which is fresh, hot, meant to be eaten in the moment it hits the table? How does
Right.
that survive 30 minutes, to your table at home that you start eating it? So
Mm.
we worked on not only a package, what's our cooking process? What's our off-premise make line? How do we
Right.
separate our workflow from the in-store consumer to the off-premise
Mm.
consumer? How do we separate and make it easier and more convenient for the drivers using locker boxes? How do we
Mm-hmm.
redesign our store to include those locker boxes
Mm.
in a thoughtful way so they're not hideous, right?
Right.
This is a whole idea. Same with catering. That's why I'm saying it. If you're thinking about
Yeah.
catering, if you're thinking about programmatic private parties and events, you have to think about it very holistically, right?
Right.
Not everything on your menu makes sense for that
Uh-huh.
offering. Not
Yeah.
the packaging you do for to go and the packaging you do for catering are definitely need to be different, right? So
Yeah.
it's really about thinking about it again strategically in your way,
Right.
more holistically, for sure. The
No,
second
that's why
one,
it's so
oh, go ahead.
important to understand operations, because everything you're talking about, it's like all this operational side. So how that ties into what you're doing in marketing. So those two
Right.
things need to tie in. And that's sometimes not the easiest relationship or communication between marketing and ops. So
They have to be in the same room.
yep.
All
Yep.
stakeholders. I'll say the second thing about you mentioned something that I've never said this out loud. So breaking news. You said that, yeah, in fast casual, maybe private parties. You're right. Most fast casuals are not set up. They kind of have a open dining room, right?
Yeah.
Well, this idea came that I'm going to share for the first time as a result of us looking to build a corporate store. So we're
Mm.
going to build a Pepper Lunch corporate store in North Los Angeles County. And as we're looking at real estate, the real estate we need, 1,700 square feet, essentially doesn't exist. It's basically nothing between 1,600 and 2,000 square feet exists. It's all taken
Huh.
because all the fast casuals and quick serves have taken it. So we're
Right.
being presented with 28, 3,000, 3,500. And we're looking at these spaces and going, well, as a corporate store, we need a sales center, a place we can sit down and do discovery days and PowerPoint presentations. We also need it as a training center. So we're going to bring our
Yeah.
franchisees from all over the country, and they're going to spend a couple of weeks with us, and they're going to get trained. So we need sort of that classroom private environment. But
Yeah.
what about buying that space, paying for that space every day, and only using it during those sort of short-term needs?
Mm.
Or what about repurposing it as a private dining room? Wouldn't it be interesting to have
Yeah.
it be convertible, where it could be
Mm.
open and we have extra capacity in the dining room, or it can maybe be closed with glass walls or glass sliders or something like this, where it can be semi-private or private, and then a group could have a pepper lunch DIY teppanyaki experience together. And our
Yeah.
meals are very social, and they're very visual, and
Yeah.
they're very people like to talk about what they created on their plate versus what you created. So
Right.
just a way of thinking about, hey,
Mm.
if I have a fast casual space and maybe it's a little too big or maybe it's a little too open and not so personal feeling, can I break that space up into different areas and different
Mm.
experiences and maybe set aside a piece of the space to start to think about how fast casual and private events could be held? Maybe it's
Right.
economics. Maybe it's a little more affordable to do that for a group. They can do it more often. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
experiential like ours, right?
Yeah.
Unique and experiential. But figure that out for your brand. I think whether it's that or catering, or off premise, or
Yeah.
things, events out in the community, there's a lot of ways to get out there in real life, right?
Yep. Yep. And that's innovation right there, Troy. You got to be thinking out of the box all the time because things are just constantly shifting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are you gonna
Real estate's driving a lot of innovation today. I'll tell you that.
do? Yeah, 100%.
So, Sebastian, we're going to start to wrap this up. A couple of things.
Yep.
If you would tell us a little bit about your book and how people can find it, I think that
Sure.
could be a great leave behind. And then also
Sure.
talk a little bit about your podcast. You bring restaurant leaders on and have conversations there as well. So share that
Yeah.
so the audience can find you.
Sure. So my book is the Restaurant Marketing Insider, and it's just comes from my own experience in the restaurant and the marketing world. And the whole book is just for what I talked about here. It's about building long-term value, right? Building their structure, not going the easy route and following those tactics and quick fixes. It's about really building a strategy, a sustainable strategy for your restaurant. So that's what the book is about. And then our podcast, Restaurant Leaders Unplugged, is about the book you can find on Amazon. Go order it there. And if you want to copy of that, and of course, let me know what you guys think about it if you read it. Now for the podcast, yes, Troy, we just, I think there's just so much knowledge of, we try to bring a lot of people together where we can get insights from restaurant leaders so we can bring value to people in the industry. So we interview people from operators, to chefs and, and people in different facets of the industry, and really learn from them and get their insights. And not just their insights, but what I'm interested in this podcast too is the personal stories, because we always get into the surface level many times, but I like to get into the deeper level because that's where leadership starts. It's at the a deeper personal level. You know what I mean? So that's what the podcast is about. So hope you guys will tune in.
And I assume we can find that everywhere podcasts are found.
Yes, you can find that anywhere podcasts.
Now,
so our YouTube
Sebastian,
channel,
do you film those and put them on YouTube as well?
We do.
I love it. Okay, I like the visual side.
We're marketing people, man. We syndicate the hell out of that.
What's funny is I'll say this, and a plug for this show and yours as well is I pay for YouTube because I got tired of ads. But when you pay for YouTube, little quick fact for those of you that drive a lot or fly like myself, is if you pay for YouTube, then not only is it ad free, but you can actually open other apps and it will play in the background. So I can have my map app, Waze up. And I can have something. I'm not watching it, on the phone holder. I'm not watching the show, but I have other apps or my directions or whatever up, and but it will play in the background and continue to play while that YouTube is not shown. If you don't pay for YouTube, as soon as you swipe away from YouTube, it stops. So I like YouTube as a listening experience because sometimes there's visuals that you want to peek down at or have a quick look at or go back. But just definitely. a little side note there. Sebastian, we try to end these shows with a couple fun questions. The audience may not know that I'm a third generation Miamian. I'm from Miami.
That's right.
And a lifelong Miami Hurricane. So a little jealous, although I don't want to go back and live in Miami necessarily. When I have friends like you that live there all the time, I like to keep up with what's going on. So my first question is, are the Dolphins going to make the playoffs? And if they do, are they going to get
buried? Oh, man. That's a hard one, man. Let's be the cheerleader here. Let's say yes.
Okay, all right. He's being politically correct because he's afraid people will come after him. Okay, that's Miami for you. Don't talk against the team. Yeah,
that's it.
Very good, Sebastian. Not one of your own restaurants from your restaurant group, but what's a hot new restaurant that our friends who might be traveling to Miami sometime soon have got to check out?
Man, Miami's got a lot of new things going on, and a lot of new restaurants opening up. So let me see, man. There's so many on the list, but I'll tell you, there's a cool speakeasy that just opened, and it's called Panamericano.
Okay,
and it's inside one of the the restaurants, and they do these rituals where you can go in there and they do these really cool rituals with cocktails in front of you, and they do this whole show, and it's just very cool to experience. And they have non-alcoholic beverage like cocktails as well which they do this whole experience. So it's something very unique and cool to experience. And I think with if you're visiting Miami, go check it out.
That'd be cool. Is there a Delilah in Miami? It's either there or it's coming soon. Have you heard about Delilah yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, I think it's coming. So it's in Vegas, LA. I think there's one in New York. The one in Vegas, really, really cool. 1940s, 50s style. I think really 30s and 40s style. Maybe it's from Prohibition 20s, but shows. It's a show. It's like a dinner club, a dining club with a show. Really phenomenal music.
Yeah.
I think what's coming to Miami, I'm excited about that because the idea to get Cuban and other Latin performers and musicians in a sexy, refined, upscale, comfortable environment with great food. Man, I'm really excited about that. I've had the great fortune of going to Delilah. Hard ticket to get actually in Vegas.
Yeah. So Miami's a perfect city for that. So
yeah, it's like should have been born there for sure. Well, good stuff. All right, Sebastian, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your motivation, encouragement. If anybody's looking to connect with you, how can they find you and talk about marketing for their brand?
Oh, thank you, Troy. I appreciate your time. and for having me. So you can find us on Forge Online. Just go to Breath Marketing, Breath, that's BREADTH, marketing.com. And you can just contact us there. You can also find us on social, same thing, Breath Marketing, and just message us. If you need help, we're here.
Awesome. Thanks, Sebastian. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Troy. Appreciate it, man. All right. Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.